With us now, Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. You can call Bob at 479-1160 with your question. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us here today. I wanted to ask you a question about one of the big hot topics of this year. It was a hot topic, but now here we go to cold weather. So tell me about the overwintering habits of the spotted lanternfly, and what's going to happen with that thing, and when are we going to expect to be talking about him again?
Well, they overwinter as egg masses. So the adults will lay eggs. Well, the adult females will lay eggs in the fall, and those are just a little mass of eggs with a coating over top of it. And they'll lay that on all kind of different surfaces. So it's not necessarily on a living tree. It can be on, sides of buildings. It could be on camping trailers, on vehicles, any number of things. Train cars, whatever. Wherever, close by they happen to be. So that's what's happened at this point. So at this point, really, there's still things you can do. So number one is look for them, because you won't have to look for the flying insects, but look for those egg masses. And then if you find them, you can actually scrape those off and dispose of them. So that really helps curb next year's population. There could be some natural things over the winter, the weather, that sort of thing. But for the most part, those eggs are protected under that coating. They'll survive pretty well and be there in the spring to hatch out.
It's interesting. I'm looking at a checklist, a spotted lanternfly checklist that was developed by Penn State Extension and distributed through the Agriculture Department, and it shows very vividly potential egg mass locations, outdoor light bulbs, outdoor furniture, in the cushions of outdoor furniture, fence posts. There's a vehicle tire there, some camping equipment, out of sight areas. Those egg masses aren't, they're not great big bulky, they look like eggs. They look more like basically gray colored bark on something.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost like you took a little bit of putty and just were trying to patch over a hole, and that's about all it is. But yet there's multiple eggs underneath those, and that can vary a little bit in the numbers, but anybody that lives in those areas, or if you're moving things from those areas where they are known to be, say you buy something from somewhere down there.
Yeah.
Maybe a vehicle or a piece of equipment or something, a camper, that needs to be inspected before it's brought back to here. And that's one of the big ways that this type of an insect gets moved around. It's not necessarily on its own, which you can do, but it needs help from us to do that and spread it.
I did notice that there's a big bad typo in the checklist, but that's just my sort of
Well, point that out to me. I'll be more than happy to pass that along.
Okay, on the part where it says, do your part to help stop this invader, there's a great big checklist with different categories. And under building materials, where it should say bricks and cinder blocks, it says brinks and cinder blocks. Fix that, will you?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting that on that list it says check yourself before you get into any vehicle to make sure there are no spotted lanternfly nymphs or adults on you.
That's right, and maybe not so much the adults, but the nymphs. They crawl around, and they're smaller, so they can. They're bigger than a tick, So we know that ticks can get on us and very easily, and we may not see them. But those nymphs can be the same way. They can just, get in a little crease of clothing, and you never know they're there.
Yeah. So we're thinking about, as we enter into winter, spotted lanternfly nymphs or egg masses, and that's one thing. But The emerald ash borer was the big talk a couple of years ago. Now we don't hear anything about that. Is it because it's not out there anymore, or it's just we've moved on?
It's well, we have moved on because this has become the talk of the day, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still there.
Uh-oh.
You know, it's still causing damage. But you know, like the gypsy moth, that was a big deal for a while, and then it tapered off.
Mm-hmm.
And so the emerald ash borer, as it's gone through and created all its destruction and killed, you know, trees by the tens of thousands across the state, then that weeds out that source.
Well, so basically, we've deprived it's deprived itself of its food. It's eaten itself out of house and home.
Yeah, in this case, yes. So it has to go where there are ash trees, and so those are been greatly reduced, and so it doesn't have as much of a food source for sure.
Yeah.
In the case with the gypsy moth, that there were other natural. There's a disease that affects the young larvae of the gypsy moth,
mm-hmm.
and that was able to get a foothold. And in years where the insect, after it hatched, and it was that little larva crawling around, then this fungus would attack them, and especially on years where it might be a little cooler and damper,
mm-hmm.
And the caterpillar was stressed a little bit, that allowed that disease to affect it and kill those off. So that's just one natural response and buildup of those natural predators and parasites that are able to help us
mm-hmm.
Reduce the impact of some of these invasive species.
Now, I want to ask you as well about winter coming and invasive plants. Is this an opportunity for folks to go out and rid themselves or their properties of invasive plants?
Yes, it can be. Sometimes it's harder to identify those depending on what it is, because we've got insects and diseases and plants, and we have woody plants, we have herbaceous perennial plants that are all can be invasive species, and at different times of the years they may go dormant, and we may not even know they're there, especially with the like purple loosestrife would be considered a herbaceous perennial. So the root system lives from year to year. The top of the plant dies back in the fall,
mm-hmm.
and so we'd look out there now and maybe not even know it's there. We won't know it's there till next spring when it starts to grow again, and then it flowers and it looks so pretty, but yet it's an invasive species.
Okay.
But with the egg masses and the spotted lanternfly, yes, that's something that people can be active with all winter long to remove those where they can, and that can greatly help reduce the population on a localized area, but nonetheless can greatly help and is fairly easy to do. Other than your time, pretty inexpensive to do versus some of the other tactics we have to try and deal with it at other times of the year.
Okay. I want to move on.
Same thing with bagworm. Bagworm can be an isolated problem on a variety of plants, especially arborvitae. Bagworm's not an invasive species,
mm-hmm.
But right now there are bags hanging on arborvitae trees. Sometimes they also get on maple and some other species. Arborvitae is their biggest biggest thing that they plant that they attack.
Mm-hmm.
But they feed on the foliage and will just strip the plant of the foliage. And usually by the time you notice it, it's most of the plants have been defoliated, and arborvitae don't like that real well.
Yeah.
So, but this time of year, you can look and you can see these brown little bags hanging
mm-hmm.
off of branches in the arborvitae, and you can go out and hand pick those, because right now those would have eggs in them.
Okay.
So they're full of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be 50, 100 eggs or more one of those bags. So if you think about that hatching out in the spring, and all of a sudden you go from 0 to 100 little caterpillars feeding on the foliage on a plant, it makes sense how quickly they can defoliate a tree.
Hey, we have a caller on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to call and thank Bob. I called several months ago and asked him how to put an Amaryllis bulb to sleep, and he told me how to put it in the refrigerator. And anyway, I took it out about a week ago and potted it up, and the one Amaryllis is up about 3 inches, and the other one I can see the green around the bulb, so I think it's still alive. But I just wanted to call and thank him for his good advice.
Wow. Well, thank
All right,
you
there
for
we
that
go.
amazing testimonial.
Yes, thank you very much, Bob.
All right. Hopefully they'll keep going, and you'll have a nice flower stalk there with a flower on it soon.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day today, and thanks for calling.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, that's very nice. How about that, Bob?
Yeah.
Got to make
good.
you feel
I don't
good.
always get to hear what the results of...
Yeah. Well, you do if it's a complaint, but there's
that's a given.
No hesitation to complain, but it's good to hear the good stories, too. I had a question for you about something that I noted, and I've been considering putting in our yard. The tall ornamental grasses that really look nice and shapely. They're sort of oval-shaped once they get up to their full speed, and sometimes they cascade out. Those things, I note that some people leave them at their height, their summer height. Some cut them back. A Zinc Hall over at IUP, they cut those ones back all the way to ground level. When they start growing again, how quickly is that going to get to that gorgeous shape that it was last summer?
Oh, within a couple of months it will be, because those stems die back anyhow. So you have to cut it back, whether you do it in the fall after they turn brown, or you wait and leave it there all winter. And really, the reason to leave it there all winter might be, depending on where you have it planted, it might provide a little bit of a windbreak. Some people, because you've got the seed pods on the top, and just it moving back and forth in the wind can be positive attributes of that plant. And then with the seed heads on it, and sometimes those have some color to them. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it might be a little bit of a copper or purplish color on the top, so it adds some interest in the winter landscape when it sometimes is a little bleak. So you can leave them on all winter, but before they start growth in the spring, those need to be cut back anyhow.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering, because I noticed that some people have left theirs up and have not cut them back, and those ones over at IUP were cut back to about ground level. So those will be growing back next spring.
Yep, because they always come right back up they grow new shoots from the base. That tends to be a clumping plant, and so that each one of those each plant will maintain itself and it doesn't really, most of those don't have rhizomes, so they'll stay in that clump form. So that's usually why we have to plant them in groups to get a bigger effect there.
All right.
And then size will depend on the cultivar that you select originally. So there's a number of that are in the miscanthus, or one of the groups of those varieties of those plants that they might get 6, 7, 8 feet tall, depending on the cultivar you pick.
That's a bit
much. And then there's other of the grasses that, you can get some of them that will only be a foot tall.
All right. Very good. Well, I appreciate it, sir. Thanks for another interesting visit.
You're welcome. Welcome.